In the silence of a cell at San Quentin Prison, a man was counting the final seconds of his life. Stanley Tookie Williams, 51 years old, sat on the hard bed, eyes looking out through the only small barred window. Outside, the California sun was setting, marking the final day of a man who once shook Los Angeles with violence and bloodshed. But this was no ordinary death row inmate. Williams's name sat on the list of Nobel Peace Prize nominees, alongside Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, and Mother Teresa. A chilling paradox, a quadruple murderer and a symbol of peace existing within one person. In 1971, when Williams was just 17 years old, he and Raymond Washington founded the Crips gang in South Los Angeles. It was the post-civil rights movement era, when African Americans in the ghettos remained mired in poverty and despair. The Crips were born as a violent response to a fractured society. Williams became the king of Crips, a ruler of the underworld, where power was measured in guns and scars. But today, he looked back at his kingdom. 4 concrete walls, a lidless toilet, and death lurking behind the thick steel door. In 24 years, sitting in a death row cell, Williams had done something few believed possible. He changed. Not a fake change to seek sentence reduction, but a transformation so profound it sparked controversy. He wrote 9 books for children with titles like Gangs and Violence and Gangs and Drugs, warning young people not to follow the gang path. He established the Tookie Williams Protocol for Peace, a nonprofit organization aimed at preventing youth violence. Educators, social activists, and even legislators began to recognize his work. In 2001, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the first time, an honor received by only about 200 people worldwide each year. The Nobel nomination process is extremely rigorous. Only legislators, international law professors, and previous laureates have the right to nominate. For a death row inmate to be chosen was almost unprecedented. But can redemption be enough to erase crimes? That was the question all of California had to answer. In the history of the American justice system, only 0.3% of death row inmates are documented as truly reformed to the point of creating positive social impact. Williams was one of them, but the law doesn't look at change, it only looks at crimes. And Stanley Williams's crimes were too heavy, too blood-soaked to be forgiven. The clock still ticked steadily. Midnight was approaching. To understand why Stanley Williams had to face death today, we must return to a night in February 1979, the night Los Angeles witnessed 2 of the most brutal massacres in gang crime history. Williams, 25 years old, nearly 6 feet tall with a massive physique from years of working out at Venice Beach, was high on PCP, a drug nicknamed angel dust, notorious for its ability to turn people into monsters who know no fear, feel no pain. Medically, PCP creates a dissociative state, separating consciousness from the body, causing users to lose all capacity for empathy. But even science cannot justify what Williams did that night. The first incident occurred at a 7-Eleven store in Whittier. Albert Lewis Owens, 26 years old, was working the night shift to earn money to support his 2 young children and his wife, who was pregnant with their 3rd. He was a veteran who had served in Vietnam, survived the war, only to meet a senseless death on home soil. When Williams and 3 accomplices burst in, Owens didn't resist. He did exactly what he was trained to do, knelt down, hands raised high, didn't look at the robber's face. But that didn't save him. Williams fired 2 shotgun blasts into Owens's back from very close range, tearing his body apart from behind. Witnesses later recounted that Williams had laughed and mimicked the gurgling sound Owens made as he died, a gruesome detail showing brutality not just in action, but in soul. But that was only the beginning. 11 days later, Williams struck again at the Brookhaven Motel in Los Angeles. The victims were the Yang family, Yen E. Yang, 76 years old, his wife Tsai Shai Yang, 63 years old, and their daughter Yi Chen Lin, 41 years old. They were Taiwanese immigrants who came to America with dreams of a better life. The Yang family had worked tirelessly to buy this small motel, turning it into their home and only source of income. That night, Williams broke into their private room. In a few minutes, 3 lives were taken for less than $100, not enough to buy a pair of shoes. The scene was like a slaughterhouse. Forensics described the wounds on the 3 victims, showing they had tried to shield each other, but bullets know no mercy. Police found 12-gauge shotgun shells at both crime scenes, shells from the same gun. Fingerprints, witnesses, and testimony from accomplices after their arrest all pointed to one person, Stanley Tookie Williams. But what haunted most wasn't the physical evidence, but his absolute coldness. No remorse, no explanation, not a single tear. In 1981, the jury took less than 2 hours to sentence him to death for 4 counts of first-degree murder. The victims' families sat in the courtroom, holding each other and crying. They would have to wait another 24 years for justice to be served. The morning of December 13, 2005 began like any other morning on death row, oatmeal and milk for breakfast. But everyone knew this was no ordinary day. Williams's legal team had worked through the night, preparing every document, every final argument to present to the courts. They knew this was a race against time, a battle with odds near zero. In California history, only 3% of clemency petitions are approved in death penalty cases. That number didn't discourage them, because Williams was not an ordinary death row inmate. Around 1 p.m., the legal team began their final campaign, presenting every piece of evidence of Williams's transformation. They emphasized that he had spent more than 2 decades warning youth away from gangs, a mission few had the credibility to accomplish as he did. From inside prison, Williams had become the most influential voice in the anti-gang violence movement. Educators across America used his books in their educational programs. Thousands of teenagers had abandoned plans to join gangs after reading his words. This wasn't just remorse. This was true redemption, measured in lives saved. But the prosecution and victims' rights organizations vehemently objected. They called Williams a fraud, a skilled actor playing the role of a penitent man to escape punishment. Deputy District Attorney John Monahan posed a sharp question. Had Williams ever broken the gang code of silence? Had he ever shared inside information with police to help dismantle criminal networks? The answer was no. Williams still refused to snitch, an action he considered betrayal. Monahan said, "What message is he sending to children? Don't snitch, don't cooperate with police. Is that true redemption?" To many, this was proof that Williams had never truly severed ties with his past. The case had a special element, the connection between Williams and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. In the 1970s, both were familiar faces at Venice Beach. Schwarzenegger was a rising bodybuilder, while Williams was famous for his bulging muscles. According to Williams's biography, Schwarzenegger had once praised his physique and even advised him on posing techniques. The legal team hoped that memory would make Schwarzenegger see the real Williams, not just a criminal. But for Schwarzenegger, this was a difficult political test. 2005 was his first year in office as California governor, and a tough-on-crime image was vital for his political career. Granting clemency to a quadruple murderer, however reformed, could be seen as weakness. Appeals were denied one after another, like cards falling to the floor. The California Supreme Court rejected, the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals declined, and finally the U.S. Supreme Court also refused. Each closing door was another nail hammered into the coffin of hope. Outside San Quentin, about 2,000 people gathered, a sea of people holding banners, candles, and images of Williams. They chanted, "Tookie must live. Tookie doesn't deserve to die." In the crowd were stars like Jamie Foxx, who had played Williams in the film Redemption, rapper Snoop Dogg, and actor Danny Glover. Civil rights activist Jesse Jackson stood before the microphone, condemning Schwarzenegger's decision. The governor chose revenge over redemption. He's using Williams as a political trophy in an outdated justice system. At 9:30 p.m., the legal team made one final attempt, an emergency petition based on testimony from a fourth witness. This person claimed that other inmates had tried to drag him into a conspiracy to frame Williams, but Schwarzenegger denied it in less than an hour. Fate had been sealed. Meanwhile, inside the cell, Williams had seen 6 visitors for the last time. The last was Fred Davis Jackson, 67 years old, a friend who had visited him for the past 8 years. Jackson recalled he was still in good spirits, even knowing what was about to happen. It was hard to hug him because he was so big. A tray of food with turkey was brought, but Williams didn't touch it. He only drank milk and water. Jackson admitted he no longer felt hungry either. When saying goodbye, Williams told Jackson, "See you later," as if this were just an ordinary visiting day. At 6 p.m., Stanley Williams was stripped completely naked for inspection, then dressed in new clothes and moved to the death cell, a room just steps away from the execution chamber. A sergeant and 2 officers stood guard nearby, watching his every movement. Williams spent the evening reading letters, 50 letters that had arrived that day from faraway places like Italy, Israel, and across America. Many were written by children with scrawled handwriting and sincere prayers. "We are praying for you." Each letter was like a fragile thread connecting him to the outside world, a world he would soon leave forever. A chaplain was sent to provide spiritual counsel, but Williams quietly declined. He also refused the offered sedative. He wanted to experience his final moments with a completely clear mind. Though he had once said he didn't want anyone he knew to witness this sick and perverted show, in the end, he requested 5 relatives to attend. Perhaps he wanted to see loving faces one last time before darkness descended. Meanwhile, the execution team began preparations, checking needles, tubes, and 3 types of lethal chemicals. The room Williams was about to enter was once a gas chamber, where California executed death row inmates with poison gas until 1996. Now it had been converted for lethal injection, considered more humane, though death was still death. Outside the prison gates, 2,000 people still gathered under the cold California night sky. They held candles, sang, and prayed. Jesse Jackson, the veteran civil rights activist, stood among the crowd with a pained expression. He condemned, "Governor Schwarzenegger isn't making anyone safer by killing Williams. This is just a political move to appear tough." The chant, "Tookie must live," rang out in waves, but those calls could not penetrate the thick walls of San Quentin. The clock kept turning. Midnight was approaching with the cruelty of an unchangeable sentence. At midnight, the steel door opened. "Mr. Williams, it's time." He walked into the execution chamber, an octagonal room with pale green light covering the space. In the center was a padded gurney, looking like an operating table. Williams lay down calmly as staff began strapping him down with leather restraints. An officer placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture amid the cold mechanical procedure. But then everything started to go wrong. A nurse tried to insert the needle into Williams's left arm but couldn't find a vein. His massively muscular physique, once his pride, now became an obstacle. The needle went in, pulled out, went in again, causing bleeding. 20 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. Williams looked at the people poking needles into his body and asked, "You doing this right?" No one answered. Finally, the IV line was established. Williams turned his head to look at the 5 relatives sitting behind the glass. His lips moved, wanting to say something, but no sound came out. Perhaps it was, "I love you," or "Don't cry," or simply goodbye. No one could know. At 12:21 a.m., the first drug, 5 grams of sodium pentothal, began flowing into the vein, causing him to lose consciousness. Next came 50 cc of pancuronium bromide, a substance that paralyzes the respiratory muscles, causing the lungs to stop functioning. Finally, 50 cc of potassium chloride, the chemical that stops the heart. 3 drugs, 3 steps to end a life. Medicine had turned execution into a clean procedure, but couldn't hide its brutal nature. Williams's body lay motionless. 3 of the 5 witnesses from the family side, including Barbara Becknell, a former Los Angeles Times reporter, sobbed. One burst out, "The state of California just killed an innocent man." That cry echoed through the silent room like an accusation. At 12:35 a.m. on December 13th, 2005, Stanley Tookie Williams was pronounced dead. He had no final statement, and so a chapter in American crime history closed. But the question remained, was justice served, Or was a chance at redemption destroyed? Was Williams truly an innocent man as supporters claimed? Or was he just a skilled actor playing the role of a penitent? Perhaps both are true and both are wrong. Perhaps the truth lies here. People can change, but some crimes are too heavy to be forgiven. Stanley Williams saved thousands of teenagers from gangs, but he couldn't save himself from his blood-soaked past. His death didn't make anyone safer, but it sent a message. In the American justice system, redemption is not strong enough to defeat retributive justice.